So, like many before me, I want to talk about the Quartz watch crisis. So, it all started with my favorite brand, right? Seiko. In 1969, in December, they released the Astron, which is a watch that, for the first time in history, was powered by a battery. So, let's explain why that was possible before I go into anything else. Quartz is really unique. So when you hit it with an electric current, it actually vibrates at the same frequency each time, which sounds really boring, but it's kind of the key to all of this. When it's hit with the electric current, it vibrates at 32,768 times per second exactly. And so using a microchip that is able to count to 32,768, they were able to program it to release an electric current every time it reached that number, which means, bear with me, that the watch ticked once per second exactly. Okay, so why did people do this? Well, first, there was the hand-wound watch. Then there was the automatic watch, right? But these types of watches are honestly for another video. I'll do something else on that. But the focus here is on just mechanical watches in general, which are watches that use springs that slowly unravel and push forward the gears, turn the gears, which make the hands of the watch move so that it tells the time on the watch face. That was the oldest type of watch. And Switzerland was actually a real powerhouse at making these types of watches. Think brands like Rolex, Tudor, Tissot, and, well, now the Swatch Group. Like, those are huge, huge Swiss watch companies. Switzerland was very interesting. And one of the reasons they cornered the watch market is because they had neutrality during the World Wars. So the watches that were made in Switzerland could be sold all over the world, and they had all of those consumers available to them. So the Swiss companies had a huge advantage and basically a monopoly on the world's watch supply. So before this crisis, Swiss companies had 50% of the global watch share. Ridiculous, right? But Seiko, a Japanese watchmaker, and if you've been watching this channel, you know it's my favorite brand, they wanted it cheaper and more accurate. So they found out about quartz, which had a uniquely accurate vibration amount, and it was also very cheap to buy and to manufacture and to work with. So the springs are great. Don't get me wrong. Many modern watches use springs and are very accurate. Think Rolexes. They only maybe lose 1 second of accuracy per day, which may sound like a lot for a brand like Rolex, but trust me, it's not. That's typical for springs. But these new battery-operated watches were so much cheaper and more accurate because they ticked 1 time per second exactly, and they required less labor, less gears within the watch because they use more electrical components, and they didn't need like skilled artisans to put the watch together. So it's not like the Swiss companies didn't try to make a battery-operated watch. In 1960, actually, a developer at a Swiss watch company called Belova, that's still quite famous, made a watch that used like something shaped like a tuning fork, and it vibrated that using an electrical current, although without the use of a battery. And then they sold that watch as the Accutron, but it wasn't a battery-operated watch. Massive brands like Patek Philippe, Omega, and Rolex were all trying to race to develop the first battery-operated watch in the 1950s and 60s. Seiko just got there first, and it nearly destroyed the entire watch industry. Have you ever wondered why brands like Rolex, Patek Philippe, and Omega seem to only really cater to the very wealthy, and why they don't really seem to make, affordable watches? Well, they kind of used to. I mean, wristwatches were never completely affordable, but they weren't considered luxury goods. The reason Swiss watch companies transitioned to the luxury market was almost solely because of the invention of the battery-powered watch. So, sure, a company like Rolex, it used to position itself as a more high-end alternative to like other timekeeping tools. But the status of a true luxury watchmaker was actually forced on Rolex, because when the cheaper watches started to circulate, these Swiss companies, they lost a ton of market share. I mean, even today, mechanical watchmakers, so the non-battery operated watches, only account for 25% of all watches sold globally. I mean, so many Swiss companies were dying in the 1970s when the battery came out. I mean, there just wasn't demand for the less accurate, more expensive mechanical watches. And so just 13 years after the release of this battery operated watch in 1983, there were so many less Swiss companies. I mean, it went from 1,600 Swiss companies in 1970 when the watch was released, in 1969. It decreased all the way down to 600. They lost 1,000. They lost like 2/3 almost of their watchmaking capacity. So in 1983, there was a company that you might be familiar with, Swatch, right? It was actually formed. It wasn't called Swatch back then, but it was formed by the merging of these two really large watch conglomerates, right? And they merged it in order to save their companies from a collapse. And Omega is a really big name that was saved by the Swatch Group. Well, now they're owned by the group, and they're able to maintain status, but only as a luxury product, right? Because Seiko destroyed the normal market for them. So you might be thinking, Walter, but the Swatch brand makes battery-operated watches, and they're really famous for battery-operated watches. What do you mean? I mean, that's a fair point. But Seiko started making battery-operated watches after the crisis because, ride the wave, right? And in fact, they didn't even exist as a company before the crisis. They were caused by the crisis. And Swatch isn't famous for making battery-operated watches, like cheap battery-operated watches. What they're famous for in the watch world is reviving love for the watch industry through good design and fun design. But that's another video. So back to the GOAT, right? Seiko. This quartz development put Seiko on the map for watch companies for the rest of the world, right? The battery operated watches were flying off of shelves, and other companies were copying the mechanism used in the Astron. The Seiko profits were soaring, and a rock, quartz is a literal rock, had made Seiko a household name globally. Even today, Seiko leads the watch industry in many technological aspects, such as their creation of the spring drive movement, which no one else has been able to copy yet, which is a combination of quartz accuracy and traditional mechanical watchmaking. But once again, that's a very complicated topic that I would love to dive into on another video. So, I mean, there you go. In a nutshell, that's the Quartz Crisis. And if you'd like me to do a more in-depth video on the Quartz Crisis or any other topics watch related, please leave a comment and I'll get to it as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you another time. Just kidding, I'm not the tendernism guy.